Good morning. So this is session 12B. Your AI is only as smart as your data's context. And this is a panel discussion moderated by Mark Johnson, Chief Growth Officer from CoStrategix.
Thank you so much. And welcome, everybody. So I have a great panel here. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And the one thing that I did not do for Symposium, most of you probably seen me running around doing different things, is prepare my panel introduction slide. So I got everybody else's slides together, but I didn't prepare that slide. So that's on me. So we're going to have the panelists go ahead and start here with you, Eric, for introduction. A little bit about you and your company.
Sure. Eric Ferguson, Wilson Bank and Trust. We're out of near Nashville, about a $6 billion community bank, looking to grow. And we started the data journey about 3-4 years ago, and we're growing very quickly in terms of our capability, and we're learning a lot as we go. And hopefully we'll be able to share some of that learning with you, but also we're here to learn as much as possible.
Great. Markus Platzek. I'm from Munich in Germany. So first of all, thanks for having me here in the US. I'm heading the data and AI group for AMS Osram. It's a $3.5 billion company providing products around light and sensing. So very strong in the automotive sector, but also in the consumer, medical, and industry sector. We started a journey quite a time ago, since more than 5 years, very heavily based on traditional AI, so machine learning, deep learning stuff for our production and quality purposes. And we now entered the game of Gen AI and agentic AI, and we have a quite steep learning curve, especially when it comes to adoption, but also governance, and basically, what is missing as the next step to basically bring that into scale.
Great. Ken.
Hi, Ken Kaufman from Worthington Enterprises. I head up the data and AI practice. We are a manufacturer based out of Columbus, Ohio, specialize in a lot of different things from building products to consumer products, and just happy to be here and share some of the scars from deploying agentic AI solutions at our company.
Hey everyone, this is Nishit Sadhwani. I'm part of New York Life. We are in the life insurance, in general financial services. We have $800 billion assets under management. From myself, I work in the AI and data architecture team. My role is specifically focused on agentic AI platform and AI-ready data sets. Happy to share my insights.
Stephen.
Good morning, all. My name is Dr. Stephen Nunez, and I work for Supply Technologies in Cleveland, Ohio, a Park Ohio Holdings. I am their current IT business analyst manager and head of AI comedy, and I specialize in having AI deployed as an organizational change in addition to being IT's implementation. An honor to be here.
Great. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started the discussion? And I want to open this with Nishit. You can take the question first. Everyone says they're doing AI. What's actually breaking when organizations try to move from co-pilots and pilots to enterprise scale?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things. The first bit is it's really easy to get pilots going and show something. But when you're really talking about enterprise scale, you have data across multiple systems, inconsistent definitions, inconsistent lineage, right? So context, which is essentially the topic of this. So context is really important when you're really talking about enterprise scale. So that's one thing which is breaking at enterprise scale if you do not really have the right context. The other bit we have noticed is a lot of data systems, your identity is focused on humans, right? Like individuals, on like how we access systems, how we interpret systems, how we interpret dashboards. A lot of it has to be retrofitted for agents, right? In a sense that your agent needs to behave on behalf of an individual, right? So the entire identity access model is changing. So a lot of engineering effort is going towards that too in production.
That's really key. Ken, can you speak? I'm sorry. Were you going to, Eric, were you going to?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. All right, go ahead, Ken.
I think exactly what Nishit said. The context is the key. We've been moving beyond some of the workforce enablement solutions and actually deploying agents in real business critical applications. And one of these, I'll share an example that brings this to life. Our sales team processes a lot of unstructured data. They get customer requests for ordering products that are, just emails, notes, nothing standardized about them. They spend a ton of time to look up the information and process these orders in our systems. So we thought this would be a great place to start with an agentic solution. And what we found was the agents were awesome at decoding that request, parsing the unstructured data, figuring out what the customer intended, but what they were lacking was that context. So when a customer says, I want 6 large tanks, they have no idea what that means. This is where our sales team comes in, their knowledge, they know the customer, they know their business, they know what they've ordered in the past. The agents didn't know this yet. And then it also exposed things that were being managed outside our systems, like discount terms and pricing and all this stuff that we didn't really know. AI is a great way to shine lights on processes, so this was really eye-opening to us, and all these gaps were really contributing to the poor accuracy of the agent. So we had to address all that before we could get it up to a confident level.
Eric.
Yeah. No, it's very important to understand that, banks were centered around the concept of, compliance and the ability of humans to actually do certain things. So we've been training humans for years. And that comes in the form of job aids. It comes in the form of compliance processes, procedures, and even you have and we were talking a little bit about this earlier. You have your resident historian, somebody who's been there, tribal knowledge, et cetera. And so you start thinking about how that translates into your agents and such. How do they know that? And that's your context. But there's certain things that you're going to, as he pointed out, shine a light on very quickly to, where's the human in the loop fit? And then additionally, what are the elements of things that you don't know that are not written down? Because you don't have everything written down. You have people walking around that actually know what's going on. And you often rely upon those individuals. So.
Interesting. Marcus, I want to have you comment on this. You said when we were kind of discussing the idea of the panel that you will see things breaking when the organizations first try to operationalize AI at scale. But the model really isn't the problem. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the model issue is somehow solved. I know we have hallucination here and there, but we made the people aware to have a double check on that. But if we go into the direction of agentic AI, we will maybe not have the people who have this double check or the human in the loop, which means that we need to make sure that all information is accessible for the model to basically judge on the question, the problem, or take the action, what is needed. Which means that we actually need to solve 2 different topics. On the one hand, we have the term of data accessibility. So, in a perfect world, I would have a unified system architecture and just a few interfaces collecting all the data. But the reality looks a little bit different. So systems are scattered, data landscape is heterogeneous. The accessibility is not always given. So we have systems which are partly still on-prem and in a production environment, which makes it hard to access. And on the other hand, if we have this data together and make it accessible, we also need to understand it or make the agent understand the data. And that's why we need to add a layer of additional information, which is not yet present in our traditional, let's say, data lakehouse architecture. Because we are there just still pulling data together, and then the data engineers are transferring that or transforming the data into the specific needs for reports, for other systems consumed, for sharing with the customer, and so on. But now we need to make it or bring it in shape so that the agent, and we do not have any data engineer anymore at that in this loop, to basically in the runtime make the data accessible, understandable, so that the agent basically can pull the data which it actually needs. And that's a quite challenge. And if we just skip this step of contextualization and just go directly into the agentic AI space, so we will definitely have issues in scaling.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. And I think what you're kind of alluding to, all of you are alluding to a little bit of this collaboration between the AI leadership and the business to figure out how to get these agents built, how to get them operationalized, and how to get them accurate, how to fine-tune them, requires some cultural change and some training and orientation for the workforce. So Stephen, I know you've been working on those principles for Supply Technologies. Can you tell us a little bit about what your organization is doing?
Absolutely, and I'd be honored to do that. So essentially, I needed to understand. I started Supply Technologies in September of 2025, and there is a huge difference there. I have to keep learning more of the business itself, and I thought of a method that is not only understandable for just a new employee, but also for an employee that has been there for a long time, and that is an AI deployment as an organizational change through the lens of chapters. It started as an AI chapter 1 through 6. Chapter 1, it focused on what actually is AI, how can we quickly help and get quick wins through the organization. If we were to create a true AI committee, what are the members like? Once we had the member established, we then progressed to the roles, the glossary. We're letting the company know that we exist, but also more importantly, how can we help the company advance as efficiently and as organized as possible? Later on, chapter 3, 4, and 5 really went in and surveyed their business itself. We surveyed HR, marketing, sales, quality to understand how can we better help you. Are there tasks that we can help you automate, things that you feel that are being very repetitive? And only after that, we got the results of the survey back and worked together with our tactical AI teams to later address what can be proposed solutions and what type of surveys of AI tools can be used to then give back to the business as a result of our business asks.
So that's really kind of a strategy of engaging the business and identifying. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you. Engaging the business and identifying use cases that you can then begin to put into the pipeline toward the solution deployment. Sounds really interesting. So we've been talking about context. So we've kind of laid the stage, and you guys have all kind of taken a different perspective on the problem. But together, you're pretty comprehensive in your understanding. I wish you were the team I had, but I don't. So I just have you as panelists. But let's talk a little bit about context. So what does context actually mean in an enterprise AI environment? Like, let's not just toss it around. Let's give it a little bit of meat on the bone. Let's get started. Let's see with you, Nishit, again.
Yes, I think in the simplest terms, context is can your agent get the right data from the right system at the right time? That's really the principle of it, right? I know there are discussions, and there have been great discussions over here about ontologies, knowledge graphs. It's all essentially a combination of all of it. It's essentially just a knowledge layer at the very least, right? So how can you make informed decisions, right? Humans, it's easier because you have a lot of context in your head, right? But if you think about, like, let's say a new employee who joins your company, right? Like, they have absolutely zero clue of, like, the systems you use, the data, where it is. So treat agents in the same way, where it has no knowledge, right? But it has to make decisions and take actions on it. How do you give it all the information? So that's really your knowledge layer and the context.
So you mentioned glossary, things like the catalog, et cetera, other components where the data is, the systems that provide access to it. Coming back to Ken, you guys have harvested some of that contextual knowledge from your workers to improve the performance of your agents. How did you begin to implement that? How did you harvest that? What was the technique or approach that you used?
Yeah, I think we're still pretty early on with that, and I would say we've leveraged our data platform where we can. So Snowflake's got a semantic layer and a way you can capture a lot of this context systematically. It's got limitations, though. I think some of these use cases are pushing us far beyond what we have in our structured data environment. They're incorporating a lot of unstructured data, and I think that's still a bit of a gap for us, honestly. So we're still trying to figure that out.
How about you, Marcus?
Yes, so we're also using a similar stack like Ken just mentioned. The challenge is basically to bring, or let me rephrase it, to make the system broader. So we are spending a lot of time in creating these kind of semantic models for reports, for instance, in Snowflake, but they are isolated. To basically make really use of it in a broader sense, and also to enable the people of our organization to use it, we need to rethink the approach generally, because we need an overarching semantic layer to basically get rid of these data silos, because otherwise, yeah, we will be always involved and in the loop, and scalability will really become an issue on that. And as mentioned before, the agents really need to understand all contextual information. So basically, who's the user, what's the intention, what are additional information, maybe even why I'm asking that. So also anticipating what I would like to get out of it. And therefore, we need to basically have a quite broad access to this data. And the other topic which comes in is basically governance, because governance is now we have quite strict need-to-know base data access rules. Going forward, we also need to rethink if certain information objects also, which people do not have access to at the moment, may need to be accessible also for a broader audience. I mean, still on a need-to-know base, but that's a quite huge challenge as we have different stakeholders here, like security, data privacy, and whatever. I would say keep it as narrow as possible. But if a salesperson wants to understand the level of how many spare parts are still there, or need to answer production questions and so on, we somehow need to overcome the silos, because otherwise we will have scalability issues for the future as well.
And I'm curious, Eric, from the regulated industry perspective, I know you've been in a lot of banks, global banks as well, before your current role, and you've seen a lot of effort to implement within the guardrails of the regulatory compliance requirements. How does a bank address these issues in building context, and why is that important?
Yeah, if you try to start from the entire scale of all of the things that you do within a bank, it's just going to be overwhelming. You have to start small. You have to look at isolated use cases and then figure out what's going to play into that situation. We spend a lot of time training people, and as I kind of mentioned before, now you're training a machine, right? And so you have orientation, you have job aids, you have all these things for people. But now you're trying to say, how do I do this for the machine, and make sure that they're focused on that? The regulatory focus is going to be from the angle of they're used to a human doing it. So the output has to be very similar to when they start looking at you, they're going to be looking at, okay, this is what I'm used to experiencing in the past, because most of the regulators are ex-bankers. So what am I looking at? How do I actually address it? And what is my frame of reference, which is the regulatory environment? So how do we address it? You have to do it in pieces, because otherwise it's overwhelming.
Really interesting. Now, as we think about as we think about the importance of context, what happens when you actually try to operationalize agentic AI without it? Can you get very far down the road? Have you had that experience, or is it possible? Whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, I think for us, we found, like I said, the accuracy was very low until we embedded that context in there. And Marcus mentioned governance too. This was another key enabler for us. So before we deployed these agents and felt confident, we had three things that had to be true. One was traceability. We needed to be able to go back in time and trace any sales order that was entered by an agent, understand the inputs, outputs, how it came at that, how it arrived at that decision, that order. Second, we had to have a human in the loop. So we have these agents doing a lot of the work, but then the humans are still oversight and approval and accountable for the results. And then finally, we had to put the right guardrails in place, working with our security team. I think there was a lot of concern about, these doomsday scenarios. And, so for us, we wanted to make sure that we have the right, access levels and things like that. A lot of the basic foundational things that gave us assurance that these agents were not going to overstep their bounds.
So as you think about Nishit, I want to kind of pivot to another question. As you think about operationalization of the agents, what are the steps? What kind of checklist items are necessary to really prepare the organization to go from kind of the pilot stage to a deployment scenario?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things, right? It's almost, the analogy I use here is we are buying a car before building the road, right? So we should really focus on building the road. What that really means, right? So one of them is your data foundations should be there, in a sense that when we talk about AI-ready data, right, it's both structured and unstructured. A lot of unstructured data most of the organizations are not mature from an unstructured data perspective of like, how do we process it? How do we govern it, right? So the first thing I would say is just get your data foundations right. I think the second aspect of it is we have to retrofit a lot of systems, specifically identity and access systems, in terms of how do agents behave, right, autonomously, right? Like we have, because being in the regulated industry, we actively discuss of like, can we have a kill switch, right? Because you have these autonomous agents. What if one of them goes rogue, which actually did with OpenAI recently? So a lot of it is around architecture of can we have kill switches? Can we have monitoring? Can we have the proper evals? Evals is becoming a core of it because your models can keep changing, but as long as your evals for a product is in place, you can keep changing the models without having a lot of downstream impacts on the products, right? So a lot of it is around architecture and data.
Other thoughts? Anybody else want to speak to that?
I do, Sam. Some other thoughts, and thank you, Nishit. And I do agree with you there. I want to make sure that the data travels also with clear ownership, with clear buds, but also with clear as to what happens if something goes wrong as well. Agents shouldn't really know that the information exists. It is for us to humans to pinpoint where it should go, why it should go, because a lot of the times the agents can give the right answer, but it might not remember the question that it was asked.
You were going to add to that?
Yes, so basically everything said based on the governance layer. It's quite crucial, especially when it comes to the fact we think of information agents and we are consuming data and derive maybe wrong decisions out of that. That's the one case where we still have the human in the loop. The other thing is really when it comes that the agents are basically writing back into our system of records. And let's think of a chain of different agents, like a multi-agent system. And the first one is already creating a bad output, so to speak. And then the next agent is taking that as the next input data, so to speak, and then basically processing, and then this goes completely wrong. That's the one thing what we need to get under control, basically, with governance systems. The other topic is really that we are now also entering the phase of vibe coding, and we have a lot of creative people in the company who starts creating their own agents, some simpler, some more complicated, and then they are leaving the company, and some agent is basically writing back in the system of records. Then we have an issue because then we need to re-identify, okay, why did that happen, and do all the root cause analysis. And that's something where we basically need to bring this governance topic more proactive in the whole development chain, what we currently have. So that's pretty crucial.
Did you want to?
Yeah, real quick. Just add one simple way to look at this is to start with how risky is a bad outcome. So if it's customer facing, the risk of a bad outcome is really bad. If it's an internal process that's not really important and you're just testing the waters, the risk of a bad outcome is not so bad. So you align your effort, your compliance, your governance to that. And it actually is very similar. I think the EU AI Act aligns something similar. So it's basically saying, if something goes wrong, how catastrophic is it going to be? If it's next to nothing, then you don't worry about it so much.
So I think we're all building an ecosystem for agentic deployment. There has to be the foundation, I think is what you were saying, Marcus. And I think you were alluding to AI governance as opposed to simply data governance, right? So now we're talking about how do you govern the agents that are being deployed in that ecosystem? Yeah.
Exactly, and that's basically one of the biggest transformation we have in this area. On the one hand, we are basically transforming our system landscape from a classic data lakehouse architecture where we have classic, let's say, data sources and then ETL or ELT processes, and then make this data available for a consumer, away to a agentic platform where we basically need to establish additional layers here. On the one hand, to basically create an additional layer of trustful data, because like And we tried that over several years now to basically get the data under control. It's not a technical topic, it's more a people business, so to speak. And here we basically need to come with a construct to say, okay, we have big data products which have kind of a quality seal from a central team maybe, to make this data available as kind of a trustful data source. Then we need to add the semantic layer, which is also quite new. And the key requirement for us is here really that we have an overarching one. I said that we have a scattered landscape and we cannot create another data or semantic data layer silos on the SAP side, on the Microsoft side, for instance, and on security providers, which are also offering kind of services here. So that's something what we where we also need to have a holistic approach. And then we need to basically add additional layer in terms of governance. I mean, we spoke about that. And last but not least, we also need to have this action layer because now we are triggering actions and these actions basically also need to be implemented in the one or other way. And that's something what we also need to establish. So we are moving away from this classic data engineering job more to a context or understanding a layer, including actions, kind of data architecture, and which is not that straightforward as I also thought in the beginning. So.
As you also thought in the beginning. So that brings me to an interesting kind of segue on this question. I was in a presentation just a moment ago, right before this, and the CDO from Humana said, expectations are up, but patience is down in the business, meaning there's a sense of urgency, the desire to get to the benefits of this agentic world are high. Also, someone mentioned that you should build ontologies by use case so that you don't get, sort of mired in trying to build the enterprise intergalactic ontology layer. Is that your experience as well? Are you guys seeing a lot of pressure and expectations in your business to take advantage of AI, at the same time a lack of patience to get there? And this work that needs to be done, can you thin slice it in order to get it wrapped around an agentic deployment in a use case, kind of by use case framework? Does that work? Can anybody want to comment on that? First, Stan?
Yeah, so I think there are components of it, right? There are foundational layers, right? Which is, let's say, identity, right? Like that's going to be across the use cases. So you build the foundation layers, and for the separate aspect, like data aspect, like you mentioned ontologies, I think that's a good example of building use case by use case, right? But there are also foundational layers which needs to be enterprise-wide, which is identity, governance of like, are all of your MCP tools registered? Are all of your agents registered somewhere? And a lot of times business doesn't really care about it, but at the same time you have to have this in place, especially in regulated industries. So I think you have to kind of strike a balance between what can be done via use case by use case and what has to be foundational.
So how are you aligning, though, the business's expectations and sense of urgency with their understanding that these foundational pieces that haven't been built have to be built and they have to be funded?
Still working on that, Mark.
You have the question there?
Same. Sorry, but basically you have to align their expectations up front. I mean, there was actually case in point, I think MIT was doing a study about like how many use cases were successful, is somewhere in the 5% range. And so I shared that with, leadership early on, saying, we're going to do a lot of proof of concepts. We're going to be testing the waters. The technology is unproven. It's evolving. It's changing as we speak. And so as a result of that, I don't know the exact outcome, but we're going to keep trying. And that's the expectation you have to set up front. Is that, it's a continuous process. You're going to keep trying. The foundation of the data was built. I feel comfortable with that, but it's what are you building on, or what are you building next, I should say.
I can go, and I really do agree with Eric's point of view there and the shits. And leaders, in my opinion, constantly underestimate how much clarity goes into an AI transformation. The business ask, the mandate may be how much revenue can be increased by X, Y, but also reducing the cost by X, Y. I actually explore a lot of those answers and possible scenarios in my previous dissertation when I finished my PhD. And a lot of people then focused a lot on the model, which agentic model is going to be able to solve X, Y problem. And then they begin using a lot of subscriptions, and then next thing you know, 3 months from now, there is a high cost, no problem was solved. In my opinion, I think the harder the work to be brought up in those meetings is the following: agreeing on definitions, ownerships, permissions, decision rights, acceptable use cases, especially what happens and when does a human have to step in. I think that can be part of the solution, or begin to continue with that solution and decrease the chances of underestimating what our leaders are.
Other comments on that before we go to the next question?
I think you can move fast. Like obviously with the technology, you're very capable. But like Marcus said, the shift from the engineering side is changed now. You know, it's not building data pipelines and doing a lot of that work. It's more focused on the context harvesting and the change management side. So I think that's where we've seen the slowdown. You know, technology-wise, we can bring pilots, you know, up in real time, basically. But you know, once you start to operationalize these and really start to tackle some of the hard problems, that's what's going to take time, and it's usually those iterations with your business partners.
Yeah, I think we can probably close this with I think everyone who has been doing pilots now realizes that we have to go slow to go fast, right? And I think that's what needs to be communicated to the business.
Go slow to go fast. So then, is there any credibility to the possibility or the option to buy versus build in this space? And I know those questions are coming up. What can we buy so that we can go faster versus what we have to build on a custom basis? How should organizations think about that in the context of an agentic deployment solution?
Yeah, so I think the generic answer to that is, if it's a moat for your company, you would rather build, right? Versus if it's a commodity, you should buy. The challenge, even as an architect today, is a lot of agentic AI solutions today are outside, which are like startups, right? And you're here in a Fortune 100 company trying to build production level systems using, let's say, a buy solution, which is by a startup, which might not exist 2 years from now, right? So I feel like those are the hard decisions that we have to make, because like, do you really trust building your production systems on like a company that has existed for 6 to 8 months, right? I think there's no right answer to it, Mark, but I would say if there's a clear moat to your organization with the process, you would rather build versus buy.
Other comments on that question? Everybody generally agree?
Yes, and the other thing to keep in mind is that most software that you currently have, for the most part, to survive, they're going to have an element of AI in it eventually. You know, so be prepared for that. You know, how they deploy it or how they use it is going to be the key. How they built it also, and kind of thinking through, you know, are you comfortable with that? There was somebody that I was listening to earlier. They were talking about having a kill switch. That's exceptionally important. You know, being able to turn it off, just because they're offering it as a new, you know, way of maybe increasing their price or maybe even just keeping the software that you have. It's important to be able to turn it off. And we've seen that in many of the different situations to where we're buying new software or the ones that we have existing.
We have an interesting situation happening in the room. And no, it's not bad. Don't get all panicked or anything. There will be 2 people in the room who will get panicked, and they kind of know who they are. One's sitting over here, he's younger, and his dad's sitting over there, he's older. He's a CEO of a startup that's building agentic solutions, and we're a 20-year-old company that are building agentic solutions, and we just happen to be talking to the same customer. Interesting conversations that are a little bit different. You know, but I think the perspective is that the young people who are forging the future, who are building AI solutions, they have no fear, and they see only possibility to create better solutions. They're not encumbered by the past, and you know, so I think it's incumbent on all of us to be thinking about how can we speed it up. I mean, maybe the customer will buy his solution, or maybe the customer will buy our solution. I don't know, but we're having conversations, and I think the key is that the customer's open to having those conversations, right? They're seeking ways to speed it up, to get better, faster, cheaper, smarter solutions in this AI space. So I think it's a question we all have to think about, is what can be bought and what do we have to build? And I think I love your scenario of the competitive moat, if it is a competitive moat, we need to really build out with our IP and keep it tight and close and private, if that makes sense. And I didn't call them out to stand up, so nobody knows who they are, right? All right, so that's pretty good. All right, so the next question I guess I have here for you guys is the agentic AI as consumers, of our data, of our environment. And this is, agents are becoming consumers of enterprise data. What changes in the way we think about data architecture when that becomes the norm? So we have more agents than we have employees. What changes?
I can get started on that one. And based on my studies, observations, and the current situation at my company, I make more of the context, the rules, the ownership, the lineage, and permitted use cases to travel with the data. And the reason I say that is because of its insurance. And if we try to work again with its foundation and making sure that it's very solid, we're still going to have its multiplier, which is the AI agent, to perhaps get more solid answers and perhaps ownerships. However, agents shouldn't just know that they can access the information. They should know why it exists, how it can be used, and why they must stop to involve a person. I do believe we mentioned this one already. I also believe that every agent should have its own identity and permissions and audit trail. And that's how I think consumers of enterprise data can be changed about its own data architecture.
Other comments?
Yeah, I would say structured data for the most part is very mature in general, right? I think it's you essentially just need to tune it, right? Data governance used to be an afterthought. I think AI has brought it at the forefront that it cannot really be an afterthought. Like, you need all of it to reason. I think unstructured data is a different beast altogether, right? And I think every company is trying to figure out, okay, how do we govern it? So I feel like every company should have some sort of an unstructured data strategy of like, okay, how do we process it? How do we essentially structure it, right? How do we structure the unstructured data? Also, metadata for unstructured data is not as straightforward as structured data, right? Because you're doing transformations, you're getting a lot of technical metadata when you're doing structured transformations. With unstructured data, you need to essentially extract the information to even get technical metadata. And a lot of business metadata lives in the systems, in the source systems. So how do you bring it all along? So I would say like getting mature with unstructured data, because that's a lot of what like agents consume today is pretty important to the data architecture.
So as we're drawing to a close, I have one kind of future-looking question for the panel here. So technology is changing faster than any of us have experienced. So how will leaders make architectural decisions when the shelf life of those decisions will be only about 6 months, if that? Eric?
Yeah, seeing around the corner. That was actually a conversation that Jensen had not too long ago. He said somebody that's smart isn't necessarily somebody that's got a high IQ, but it's somebody that's being able to see around the corner. So how do you prepare yourself for that? And, just from a simplistic point, I don't look at a company when I'm partnering with them from a static level. I look at their development pipeline. So where are they going? What are they investing in? And then how does that actually help me prepare for the future, for that matter? And you don't know what that future is going to be, but you're trying to make sure that at least you give yourself that capability in the future, so that you're not stuck in a static environment. So pipeline, I think, is often like underrepresented in terms of when you look at a company that you're going to partner with.
Is Ken's commitment to Snowflake a smart decision for the next 6 months?
So to add on to that, I think our approach has been, let's make a decision, go and learn. So we know we've taken the approach of building some custom RAG solutions that we've thrown away 3 months later because our provider did give us an easy button for that solution. But the learnings throughout that process are still valuable. So I think if you're waiting for everything to get sorted out, you're just going to put yourself more and more behind. So I'm talking with my tech leads now and giving them the freedom to make decisions. And if we do decide 3 months from now this was a bad decision and we have to pivot, that's fine.
There's some tolerance in the organization for that. All right, any other comments on that question? Otherwise, I'm going to open it up to the floor. We have about 5 minutes left.
Maybe one last comment, because we
we just went through this journey. I mean, this is still ongoing, but we also have some experiences in the last months. And yeah, we set up a center of excellence a year ago. And during the first 4 to 6 months, we established 3 decision meetings per week. So we need to have kind of an agility when it comes to decision making. We also threw away certain things. We try to keep our technology corridor quite narrow, so to not bring in all the different foundation tool providers which exist on planet Earth, but to really focus on 2 to 3 strategic platforms. And within that platforms, we took the decisions to basically get it moving, because we also didn't want to wait too long to say like everything is market ready. And left and right, everyone was overtaking us. So you need to get some speed in that, but you also need to be able, from my perspective, to also rethink certain decisions, and then also use completely different directions on a very short notice, so to speak.
Yeah, we're seeing similar things with a lot of our clients. We built a context accelerator that, how long it's going to be around or how fast we can get it, to drive value for our customers notwithstanding. But we felt like that we needed to speed it up. So that was one way that we chose to do it. If you're interested, you can chat with us at our table out there. I want to open it up for questions in the last few minutes that we have.
Hi, I'm Brendan from Align AI. My question is just, how do you assess the quality of context? Do you look at it from the perspective of the use case back into the data, the source system, or do you kind of work forward from the data to try to assess quality in general for being accessed by agentic?
Ken can probably take that, but I'll take a stab at it. I think first of all, you're going to have a context discussion when you don't see the accuracy. Like you see a huge variation, right? So you have a benchmark there, right? Like, okay, I built this tag application. It is giving me 80% accurate. Every 4 out of 5 answers is correct, but one of them is wrong, right? That's when you essentially bring in the context, right? And you kind of see the delta of like your improved accuracy per se. So that's one way where you already have the eval framework. Then you're kind of just backtracing to like adding the context layer. Does it improve the accuracy or not?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And we've kind of gone at it from a use case perspective narrowly at first, but we are trying to position this as a reusable layer that many different agents are going to take advantage of, whether they're just, chatbots or decision intelligence engines, whatever they may be. We want them all going to the same layer. So yeah, trying to think about it a little more holistically.
Okay, another question over here.
Thank you very much. I've learned a lot. You've had a lot of experience and you ended up with some good positive things. I'll come at it from a slightly different angle. If you knew then when you started what you know now, is there any like hard lesson or something that happened that you say, wow, I wish I would have known this. I wish I would have done something different that we could learn from?
Maybe I can take the question first, and then our colleagues would add. Like from a technology perspective, I would say we did quite good and solid decisions. Where honestly speaking, I would not change them now after a year of working with these kind of tools. But when it comes to prioritization, we spend a lot of time and effort on topics which are let's phrase it like that, not differentiating in our business models. So we spent a lot of time in chatbots, for instance, for topics like IT service management chatbots or financial ask your data agents and so on and so forth. And that's something what I would not do again, to be honest, because these are topics which are basically more or less standard. I mean, we have standard regulations, how we have to report data, and that's something what I would try to get out of the box to keep the capacity of a small team intact to really work on the differentiating factors, like improving the production, improving R&D, or basically making better access to our customers. So that's definitely something I would check. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. And for me, and thank you for your question, I would try to change the question of what AI are we trying to implement, and instead go back and say, how ready are we for an implementation like this? and I would try to survey more, survey faster, survey more in depth, research more, ask the departments more early on, work more productive on our governance models, because chances are there may be different kinds of AI adoptions that will be coming in the future. And I think that's what I would do. Just survey more in depth, which departments, how ready are you versus another department, versus saying, I want to catch up and implement AI because we have a mandate.
On the business side.
On the business, yeah.
Yeah, so from a technological perspective, I would not change a thing, because I think all of those battle scars are necessary, because all of them are teaching you something of like what works and what doesn't work. At the same time, I won't really chase the next best thing. Like MCPs became a thing, right? A2A became a thing. Like you don't really know if they're going to turn into like true protocols that are going to be adopted, right? So you'll probably wait, but I think those battle scars, purely from a technology perspective, are necessary for your organization to learn and grow and see what works and what doesn't.
All right, we have time for another question.
And I was just going to add one small piece. Start small.
But start, right?
Yeah, but start, yes.
And when you hit
of
a
course.
wall, when you face a wall, run through it. That's what Dr. Wayne said.
Like an LLM.
Any other questions in the room before we wrap? All right.
We are out of time. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, all the panelists, and thank you, Mark.